you very much. The next topic is timely given the current economic crisis and everything that has going on. And the question is, should we include credit checks as part of background checks? And why or why not? And for this question, I'm going to invite Jim Perry to answer. Jim?
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to give you a practical answer that does have legal underpinnings, and then Patty is going to give you the sage legal advice on this answer. But the question I'll ask you, as I see in Patty's slide, what is the job relatedness? And is the person responsible for financial resources for your company, perhaps your customers? Are they responsible for credit, perhaps like a CFO or a controller? Do they have P&L responsibility? I would say absolutely. A credit check would be job related to that person's position. But if the person that we're talking about has nothing to do with finances or credit worthiness, no P&L responsibility, then the person's ability to perform that job would not have much to do with their credit check or their credit score or their credit checking. So I would say there would be no practical application or reason to do a credit check on that type of position. I would be interested to hear what Patty has to say about this.
Okay, so let's hear what Patty has to say about this. Go ahead, Patty.
All right, thanks. And yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you, Jim. I think that it really comes down to is credit, and understanding credit, is that a part of the job that's important? A couple of things, because it is a problematic area. And the first thing I think that many times employers forget in this kind of rush to use credit checks to gain information, the Federal Bankruptcy Act, we think about Title VII and those kinds of things, but the Federal Bankruptcy Act is very clear that there can be no employment discrimination based on bankruptcy. And that includes being associated with someone in bankruptcy, so a spouse or a family member who has filed for bankruptcy. So if you think about a credit check, I guess the worst kind of a credit check, the worst kind of credit that could be portrayed in a credit check would be that someone has filed for bankruptcy. But if you think that you can't even take that into account, that makes for an interesting dilemma. The EEOC, Title VII, those kinds of things, of course, are very much concerned with this kind of an issue, and it is permitted only if job-related. And I think Jim gave some good guidelines for how to think about that. And the reason is that credit requirements tend to have an adverse impact on women and minorities. And so you're going to find that if you have credit requirements as part of the process, that you will screen out women and minorities at a greater rate. And so that's the concern of the EEOC in Title VII. Now, what they're looking for is this concept of disparate impact. And are we excluding a particular group at a higher rate than other groups? And that's what will tend to happen when you talk about credit requirements in terms of women and minority. And the burden here is on the employer. So the burden is for the employer to show what Jim was just talking about is, and then that is the business necessity. Is there a manifest relationship to employment for the credit requirement? And courts will require, and the EEOC will require, that you can show that any kind of requirement like this is predictive or significantly correlated with the work behaviors that will make someone successful in a position. And even then, if the employer can meet that burden, and if the employer shows that there is a business necessity and that someone with good credit will have more success in the job, the whole process, the practice of getting the credit checks may still be illegal if there is a comparable requirement that would also be valid, that would also be a valid predictor and have a less adverse impact. So the real concern here is on women and minorities and the fact that we would potentially and most likely be screening them out at a greater rate. So I just always caution employers that they really need to engage in that analysis that Jim really led us through and decide, is this something we really need to have? Is it job-related? Does it significantly correlate or predict someone's success in the workplace. There's also some expense involved, so it's not necessarily the best thing for every employer. Chris, back to you.